Hello, Ruben here. I've had a lovely holiday. Thank you for asking. Welcome to this week's Samplecast. This is episode 71, and it's a huge show. As always, when I've come back after a few weeks away, there's a lot to cram in. So I'm trying to cover mostly this week's releases, but there's going to be a few from the last couple of weeks as well. There's a review of Rob Papen's Go2 Synth and also Audiobro's Genesis Children's Choir. I'll be giving that a quick once-over later on in the show. I've also got an interview with Yaiza Varona. She is a fantastic composer. I went to see one of her shows earlier on in the week and it really blew me away. So I'm looking forward to chatting to her on the Samplecast podcast. So let's get on with this week's show. Let's start off with something new and a bit unusual for the show. This is a new hardware synth from Dave Smith, which contains 150 gigabytes of samples from 8DO. Now, as most of you will know, I'm more on the software realm than the hardware, but this release did really interest me, well, until I saw the $4,000 price tag anyway. The unit itself has digital oscillators and analog filters, and it uses samples from 8DO's basses, brass choirs, percussion and loads more. There are plans for updates and expansions in the future, including upcoming vintage synth modules and pianos. Now obviously I haven't got my hands on this. I'd really like to. If 8DO want to send me one, please feel free. But there are lots of videos online showing off the hardware and the sounds, so do check them out. Next up, Fire Strings from Paris Sampling. This is a new library, a collaboration between Oligide Paris and Divergent Audio Group. It runs in the full version of Contact 5.7 and above. It's about 8 gigs in size and contains 128 snapshots with multiple sequences, impulse responses and engine effects. The source samples here have been recorded from electric violin and guitar through analog gear. They've sent me this for a little bit of a play and I like the engine very much, but personally I'm not sure I'd have too much use for the sounds. There's nothing wrong with them as they are, but the industrial nature and aggressive processing doesn't really sit with my current projects. However, if you're looking for hybrid rises, scratchy rhythmic basses and sharp tonal pads, then do check out Fire Strings at the link in the show notes. A quick mention for this retro chiptune plugin from LoopLords. This is GenetiX and contains 100 sounds from the Sega Mega Drive or Genesis console if you prefer. It's got a few onboard effects and functions, but what I really liked was the authentic recreation of the game system sounds. There's more details at the LoopLords site. Angel Strings from Auddict next, and this new collection is 36 gigabytes in size with 11 microphone positions and features full orchestral sections, playing some unusual articulations including cluster slides, dive bombs, percussive hits and many more. Of course there are also standard articulations as well. It runs in the full version of Contact and is priced at £100 at the moment, so that's a pretty good deal I thought. Auddict are working on assets as I speak for more audio and video demos, so maybe do keep your pennies in your pocket until you've seen those. Personally, I do use some of Auddict's other libraries already and I do find them useful, so I'll be keeping an eye on Angel Strings. I'm always happy to report a new release from Eduardo Tarilonte. Sample library fans will know him as the hard-working and hard-drinking force behind many fantastic libraries. Celtic Era is no exception. It runs in the Best Service Engine 2 and it's about 18 gigs in size. The sounds here are sampled Celtic winds, harps, guitars and a few extra things as well. I've tried out Celtic Era myself and I was particularly impressed by it. Happy to report that it sounds pretty amazing, to be honest. I especially like the strummed strings and soundscapes, and I've never been a massive fan of the Best Service Engine, and it's starting to look a little bit creaky, but the patches here more than make up for it. They're very playable and inspiring. There are lots of instruments that I've never heard sampled that well, and in some cases I've never heard them sampled at all, so do check out Celtic Era at the Best Service website. The last expansion for Heavyocity's NOVO strings made quite a splash amongst many people, myself included, and I much preferred it to the base library. Now this week sees another expansion, Rhythmic Textures, and this samples a chamber string ensemble in sections with 16 articulations and over 12 gigabytes of content, running in Contact Player 5.6.8 and above. Everything is tempo synced, and there's an interesting looking texture designer to layer and manipulate the samples out of time with one another. The online videos and demos are brief, but they still give a good idea of what to expect from Rhythmic Textures, so do check them out. Lastly, a mention for a new online course from Evenant. This one is focused on creating sound design elements from scratch. It's called Trailer Sound Design. The course covers the recording process, plugin usage, processing sounds, mixing and mastering audio, and even delves into selling your own sample packs. I'm a big fan of these courses. You can purchase them in installments, and they seem to be regularly updating the courses with new lessons and videos. Do check this one out at the link in the show notes. So this is supposed to be a big review, but when I received Genesis Children's Choir by Audiobro, I was pretty much rendered speechless. So actually this is going to be a pretty short review, and I'll open it just by saying, go and buy it. Audiobro are basically the developer equivalent of an Eclipse. They only appear once every few years to surprise and delight with a new library, and Genesis is no exception. It runs in Contact Player 5.7 and above, uses a brand new engine from them, and contains 22 gigs of samples. I'm not going to delve further into the details than that, as Audiobro have already put out loads of excellent videos detailing every function of Genesis, so do check them out at the Audiobro site. They're well worth a watch. First up, the pros, and it sounds phenomenal. I have a few different children's choirs, and this is the best sounding, although not necessarily the very easiest to work with. The Auto Divisi engine works very well, and even with the hall reverb effects turned off, the transitions through the dynamics are smooth, and the legato is very nice. There's a bewildering array of effects and options here, way more than I had time to explore in too much detail, but it's going to keep some people happy for a long time. The look ahead function works in conjunction with your DAW's delay time control to ensure that syllable changes fall directly on the beat. That's very clever. I tested it out and it worked nicely. So there are a few cons. I did mention earlier that Genesis isn't the simplest to dive into. You will have to look up and see which key switches do what and how to easily move between the various playing styles. Also, the phrase builder takes a little bit of getting used to, and although it's versatile enough, you will have trouble spelling out specific words realistically. The only dodgy samples I could find were in a few of the staccato recordings where the kids have hit some of the phonemes a bit too hard. Now this is no big deal, as you can really only hear them on the close mics when there's no reverb. I told you this was going to be quite a short review because there's really nothing much negative to say about it. And in conclusion, I'll just say this: do go and buy it. I'm excited to see what this new engine can do with upcoming Audiobro libraries, but in the meantime, I'll be having lots of fun with Genesis Children's Choir. Check it out at the Audiobro site. Some interesting bargains this week, and the first is a retro style synth from Divergent Audio Group called Invasors. I actually did the walkthrough video for this a few months ago, so I've had a lot of experience with it. Invasors runs in Contact Player, it's NKS ready, and that's what I really love about it. You can manipulate the parameters using the controls of a complete control keyboard or machine. It's currently 70% off at €37.99 over at VST Buzz. There are full details in the show notes. Here's another bargain that I also had a hand in. This is Kirk Hunter's Diamond Symphony Orchestra. I did a quick walkthrough of this and you can find it over at the Kirk Hunter site. Now, I know that Kirk's libraries tend to split opinion down the middle, and honestly this probably isn't the collection for you if you already have a healthy set of orchestral tools, but for newcomers or if you just want some layering options, this library is the way to go. I won't deny that there are loads and loads of different patches here, and Kirk has included all of the legacy content as well as new stuff, so you might have to spend a little time seeking out the gems, but once you've done that, there's some really good stuff in there. Diamond Symphony Orchestra is currently 85% off at just $74.99. Lastly, a deal that really you shouldn't miss out on if you need some more sound design tools. This is a 4-pack of awesome libraries from Audio Imperia. They're one of my favourites. You get scenes from the Multiverse, Shredders, Trailer Guitars and Traveller Aurus. I do swear by these sounds myself. They're currently 69% off at just $99.99 over at Audio Plugin Deals. Do hit the link in the show description for details. I do hope I don't mangle her name too much, but this week's composer interview is from Yaiza Varona. I actually went to see a play that she's scored over the weekend, and I was completely blown away. You can find more details about that on her website. This week's Samplecast podcast features the full interview and a track called Death from her score for a show called Knives in Hens. Do check it out at your local podcast provider. A couple of cool little freebies this week. The first is River Harp from Performance Samples. Now, Performance Samples have got a new cello library coming out quite soon, but in the meantime they've released this free one. It provides some lovely underscoring textures and glissandi and loads up in the full version of Contact 5.5.1 and above. This one is highly recommended. Download it at the Performance Samples site. Clare Solo is a freebie that I found on the VST Buzz website. It's by Ivy Audio, and it's a little bit tricky to locate, so do head to the link in the show notes that will take you straight there. It's a beautiful legato female solo voice and runs in the full version of Contact 5.1 and above. It's a very simple library, but it just sounds great. Check it out at the link. This week's second big review, and it's the Go2 Synth from Rob Papen. Rob Papen's synth plugins are legendary, although personally I don't use them that often, as it's only because my style of work doesn't often call for those types of sounds. However, I've spent the last few days playing with this new synth and it's definitely won me over. This runs on Mac and PC and it's around £40, which I think is a very reasonable price in my opinion. It's billed as a simple to use synth, although I'd have to say that some experience of synth programming is necessary to get the most out of it. I do find soft synths particularly difficult to review, as many of them do more or less the same thing. As you'd expect, there are the usual controls here for waveform selection, filters, envelopes, and effects. However, a few of the sections of the interface did really catch my attention. You can automatically morph between two waveforms as they play in many different ways, and that's really easy to do. There's also 7 different morphing modes, and the XY graphic is an excellent way of keeping tabs on what's going on. The preset manager is comprehensive, and it's really easy to find and save favourite presets from the hundreds of different ones available. The arpeggio section also deserves a special mention. It's got an automatic chord section, as does the play section of the interface, and this is useful for quickly setting up fun progressions and riffs, good for house chords, that sort of thing. So how does Go2 actually sound? Well, it sounds like a very capable soft synth with clean waveforms, and many of the presets were takes on classic digital workstation sounds that I was very familiar with. It did take a bit of tweaking to push things into the unknown, but the basic stuff is superb. If I was going to be extremely fussy, and some people will know I am extremely fussy, there are a couple of things I'd like to see in a version 2 of the synth. It would have been nice to have been able to change the colour scheme or skim the synth panel a bit like you can with Silent. Also, a scalable interface would have been fun, and especially because I work on quite big monitors, would have been nice to expand that out. Sounds overall are very nice, but I usually put some sort of plugin on my synths to bring out the bite and harmonics, something like Sausage Fattener. Now there is a distort control in the amp section of Go2, which I was hoping would lend that kind of quality, but to be honest I found that a little bit disappointing. It was a little clean sounding for my taste. In conclusion, Go2 is a winner, especially at the price point of around £40. There's very little wrong with this synth, as long as you take it for what it is, a pretty comprehensive and easy to understand workhorse, although it's certainly not for absolute beginners. Okay, it doesn't do anything super innovative, but that's not really the point. Just like the name, I can actually see it becoming my go-to synth for many things. The sounds and functionality are great, but over and above that, it's an excellent platform to actually learn the basics of working with synths. The explanatory graphics can actually help you understand the processes of synthesis, and I think that's a great thing. So as a learning tool, I'd also recommend it. Go and check it out at the link in the show notes. There have been a lot of developer updates whilst I've been off air, so I'm going to cover some of the important ones. First up, it's Palette 1.1 from Red Room Audio. I wanted to feature this update as I think Red Room Audio, they've been very generous with their update to their 4 palette libraries. In total, they've given you 7 gigabytes of extra content, and this includes brand new patches, articulations, and workflow improvements as well. For most of the new content, they actually went and recorded brand new material, including a new marimba, a set of trailer drums, hand percussion, and various other articulations for all of the soloists, amongst other things. If you haven't heard of Red Room Audio before or their palette libraries, then you're really missing a trick, as they're well priced, comprehensive, and they do sound particularly good, I think. I reckon they're a bit of an unknown gem, so do check them out via the link in the show notes. Loopmasters have completely overhauled their Loopcloud service, which now gives access to the entire Loopmasters catalogue right within your DAW. You can now stream all the samples, match them to your track key automatically, and buy them as well, all from within the app, which is linked directly into your DAW. There are perks for signing up, including free points to spend on samples just for downloading the app and plugin. And having used this system for a little while, I have to say that I do like it, and version 2 of the software just makes the workflow much easier. Do check out the Loopcloud update at the link in the show notes. Orchestral Tools have completely redesigned their First Chair's string library, which I reviewed all the way back in Samplecast 13 a couple of years ago. The update is a whole new download and fixes many of the small issues that I had with the library back then. To me, this still remains one of the finest solo strings collections out there, so I was happy to see that an update is free for existing users, and there's more info at the Orchestral Tools website. And lastly, a very quick mention for Spitfire's reworking of their various Chamber Strings expansions into Chamber Strings Professional. This includes 4 additional mic positions and new stereo mixers from Jake Jackson. As of recording, the whole package is still on intro pricing, and there are good deals on cross grades for existing users. Have a look at the Spitfire Audio website. Thank you so much for making it through to the end of this week's show. It's been an enormous one with loads of products, so well done for getting to the end. If you'd like to hear the full composer interview, don't forget the Samplecast podcast is available, and that also has a lot more examples of all of the things that I've been chatting about this week. And I'll see you next week. Bye-bye now.